This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian. I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
Look, some of us are lazy, alright?
If by lazy you mean wrong.
Prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide whether the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because guess what? This film is lit. Whoever wrote Forrest Gump should probably sue the screenwriter of this film. Oh wait, it's the same person? That makes sense. It's The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to the 15th episode of This Film is Lit. On today's episode, we're breaking down the 2008 film based on the I don't know the year film, book, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button by F. Scott Fitzgerald, right?
Yes.
Do we have Guess Who?
Yes.
Am I going to get them all right?
It's going to be a little different, I think.
Let's do it then. It's time for Guess Who.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
Okay, so there wasn't a whole lot of character description in this. It's a very short story. It's
Yes.
like 20, 30 pages long.
Yeah. And somehow a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, right?
Which we'll get to.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So there is one character description other than Benjamin, but she was cut / changed.
Yeah.
So I have two things here, and what I thought it might be fun to do, they're both Benjamin, and I thought maybe you could guess what age he's supposed to be.
Now, when I guess the age, am I guessing his age in life? Like, his actual age, not the age he looks like. Right? I'm guessing, like...
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, let's do it
his
like
actual
that.
age, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, we wouldn't know what age he looks like, technically. We would only know how old he is, and thus...
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Okay. Go ahead, sorry.
All right. His sparse hair was almost white, and from his chin dripped a long smoke-colored beard, which waved absurdly back and forth, fanned by the breeze coming in the window.
I don't think he ever has a beard. Maybe one. I can't remember now. I have to remember back to the beginning of this 3-hour-long film. Why he's got to be under 30, I think. Although right around 30, he still looked a little. He looked old, He had white hair ish. I assume he was around 30 about the time he was mingling with what's her name,
Tilda
the swimmer.
Swinton.
Yeah, Tilda Swinton. Probably around 30-ish, I think, in that ballpark. So I'll say he is. This could be anything. How could I ever get this right? 10.
This is when he's born.
Oh,
It's our very first description of him.
does not have a beard in the film when
No.
he's born.
Well, it's one of the things, one of many things that the movie changes.
Yeah.
So that's something I want to talk about later.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Okay. So here's our other one. He had more hair, and it was of a dark gray. His step was firm. His voice had lost its cracked quaver and descended to a healthy baritone.
All right, here's my guess. His step was firm. That took quite a while in the film. I'll say 25.
He is 18 at this point. You're pretty close.
Yeah, Yeah, no, he was walking pretty fine by then.
Yeah.
Because when he was probably like 13 or 14 in the film, he was walking okay, now that I think about it. Fair enough.
And it's hard to tell in the movie, too, because they don't always say, like, how many years he's been alive.
I thought it was interesting that they chose not to, and I guess I get why they did it, but they chose not to use any on-screen, like, title cards for, like, what year it was.
Yeah.
Because we know he was born in 1918, because that's when World War I ended. So we, like, have a firm, like, this is when he was born date. And then we kind of, you have to piece it together based on context clues of like, okay, well, it's World War II now, so he's got to be, 25 or whatever. And I was a little surprised they didn't make it a little more clear. There are a few scenes where people say, like, how old he is, or he says how old he is, but a lot of the times you're just kind of guessing, which it didn't really bother me, but at times it did actually bother me, and I guess we can get into it later, but like there were times where certain character interactions I was trying to figure out, like, how old is he supposed to, like when he's having sex with prostitutes, I'm like,
yeah,
is he 15, 16? Is he 12? Like, is he 8? And it was a little kind of like weird. Because
that made me kind of uncomfortable, like not knowing how old he was supposed to be when they go to the brothel.
Yeah, and now it's the 1930s or 20s, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was 13 or something, but yeah, it was one of those things where it's just like, I just kind of want to, like...
Yeah, it's just kind of, like, especially, I think, in a moment like that, like, give us some kind of clue, because it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, you could even write a line in about, about how, because he does he narrates the whole thing journal style. You can even have a line about, make it even a joke if you want. I mean, they play it a visual joke where he's like, has sex like 50 times in one night with the prostitute because he's like a horny teenager.
Yeah.
But they could even throw a line in just so we know about, like, she wasn't expecting a 70-year-old to screw like he was 15 or something like that.
Something.
I don't know. I don't know if it would have been better, but there were moments like that throughout the film where I was like, how old is he supposed to? All right. But it wasn't a big deal. Okay. So I'm both wrong, but these don't count. We're scratching this one from the record.
I'm good with that.
Guess Who. Not that we even know what my tally is, but this one doesn't count. Episode 15 was a no-go on the Guess Who. Fake Guess Who. All right. Well, let's move right along then to... Was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
All right, Katie, I have a few things. First, mainly, anything other than the basic premise.
No, not really. It much like if you listen to our episode on the birds, was another one that took like the very basic premise of a short story and applied it to an almost completely different story.
Yeah.
This one is a little bit more similar than like the birds was. There is a character named Benjamin Button in both stories.
Yeah, well, that's the title of... They're the same title, right? The story and the film, so that makes sense. But that's what I had a feeling. I mean, I had a feeling. I pretty much knew when you have a 20-page short story and a 2-hour and 47-minute
this movie
film, there's no way that it's anything other than the loosest inspiration from. And so we'll get into some more specific little things that I kind of just wondered. And none of these, I don't know if any of these are even things where I'm like, that feels like something they added for the movie, except for one. I guess we'll do that one first. The thing that I felt really confident that they added for the film was the frame story of the spoilers daughter of Benjamin Button reading his journal on her mother's deathbed, on Cate Blanchett's deathbed. So that's obviously not. No, that's not. It's literally just the story of like it's just a short story about him. Yeah. So it's that's is it in journal form at all, or is it like first person or anything like that, or no? It's like third person. Like it's basically just a recounting. This is the tale of his life. Button. Kind of. Exactly. Okay, that's what I figured, and that's why I wanted to wonder. So the frame story for the film is that like we said, it's his Benjamin Button and Cate Blanchett's daughter, who she did not realize she was the daughter of Benjamin Button.
Right.
Which I actually had a slight issue with how, I mean, well, one, we laughed out loud in the moment where she figured it out.
Yeah.
Which is a problem in a movie like this.
Well, as soon as Cate Blanchett's character got pregnant,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, that's where we're going.
They have a throwaway. I felt like they handled that whole reveal really poorly, and that it was so obvious to the audience.
Yeah.
And that it felt like the daughter was so oblivious to the fact until she literally saw her name in the journal.
Yeah.
And then she has this reaction moment. When she reacts to the fact, she's like, wait, Benjamin's my father? We were like, like we both like started laughing because it's silly, because it was super obvious to the audience because, okay, well, there's a throwaway line, like I was saying, about how, oh, when did you meet Dad? Like she asked Cate Blanchett, when did you meet Dad? And she says, not long after this.
Yeah.
Whatever, which is a lie. I mean, like, she'd already met him at this point, but I guess it's a poetic lie or whatever the fuck you want to. So, but there's that throwaway line. That's the only, like, misdirection she gets or we get.
Right.
Is that, oh, I met him not long after this. But it becomes so apparent because of Cate Blanchett's age, what year she's pregnant. And now they try to give you a little more misdirection for at least a moment when it seems like she fell down the stairs and might have had a miscarriage.
Right.
But it's immediately resolved that, nope, didn't have a miscarriage.
Yeah, everybody's fine.
Everybody's fine.
Everything's fine.
Everything's
there was
fine.
blood all over the stairs, but everybody's fine.
Baby's fine. She's fine. Blood everywhere. We're all fine. Okay, cool. But yeah, and I guess what I felt like would have helped make it not so silly, because we go from a whole bunch of time in Benjamin Button's story, like within the narrative of the film and not the frame story. Mm-hmm. And then we don't ever cut back to, I can't remember her name, Catherine, whatever the daughters.
It was like Carolyn or something.
Yeah, something like that. We only cut back to her at the final moment when she realizes. Yeah. What would have helped a lot is in my opinion, if they had cut back once or twice at moments where it was obvious, like where we were starting to go, oh, this is probably her. Mm-hmm. And we saw her start to figure it out. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where we start to see her like look at her mom kind of like, are you like
why are you telling me?
Yeah.
This?
Or like inquisitively, like, is this me about me? Like, but there's none of that. It just goes from, oh, I met your dad after this. Next time we're back in that world, she's like, wait, Benjamin Button's my dad? And we're like, yeah. Like, I don't know. I just wish they had some buildup because it's so obvious to us when it's this revelation to her. It's like, are you an idiot? Like, what? Yeah. When you knew what years all of this stuff was happening? I don't know. So, yeah, that was the frame story has its problems, but in my opinion, it's an interesting idea of how to tell that story.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessary.
No.
Like, at all, honestly.
No, and especially, and we'll get into it later, but especially when you get to, like, I don't even want to say twist, but, like, the weird reveal at the end of the film of, like, when this frame story is... there are hints throughout the film of when it... But, like... It felt like, what's the point?
I don't know. My main takeaway from this movie was that every single scene could have been about, like, 50% shorter and still achieved the exact same impact. So...
I don't know if it's every single scene, but it's definitely a lot of scenes that could have been... And now we talked about this while we were watching it. I don't know if I ever got bored watching the movie.
Oh, I was bored.
There were moments throughout where I got a little bored, but never like super like, oh my god. There maybe towards the second half, that last third, maybe there were moments where I was like, all right, come on. But overall, most of it I thought was interesting enough, and because I didn't know what was going to happen, and I think they did a good job with the trailers in this one. They never show you. Last time, I think the youngest / oldest you ever see him in the trailers is that scene where he's riding his motorcycle, like current age Brad Pitt, like 40s or whatever. So I was always like wondering, like, what is going to happen when he starts, aging back to like little kid or like, I was kind of interested in what was going to happen. I didn't like what happened necessarily. I mean, I don't know. Anyways, but so that was the hook that kept me interested. Is like, so where's this gonna go? How is this gonna wrap up? I found the wrap up spoilers interesting, kind of, or sort of like it just kind of fizzled out for me. But still, I was interested until it did fizzle. Then I was like wondering what was gonna happen. Anyways, all right, we got to move along. On was that in the book? This one. Mr. Gateau, Mr. Cake, and his backwards clock.
Okay, that's not in the story.
None of that.
None of that is in the story, and
Fascinating.
what was the point?
Well, I got the point. I understood the point.
Like, I understand the point from a thematic viewpoint, but from a storytelling viewpoint, I don't get it.
You're not wrong.
Because there's no real reason. Like, they never really connect the clock to him.
You're right.
And that's where I thought that was going. I was like, is his mother going to get, like, struck by lightning under the clock while she's pregnant with him? What is going to happen? But nothing happened.
Because even maybe it's just the way that the story was told, and I have to see it again to make sure, but I kept waiting for something like this. If they had done parallel action of his wife giving birth, or his mom giving birth to Benjamin Button, and them doing the ceremony of the backwards clock. Like, so those things are happening at the same time, and they start the clock, and then we cut to her screaming, and Benjamin's born, and it's like, oh, it's the same moment. Or something, you know what I mean?
Something
like that.
Anything. Because without that connection, it's just a weird backwards clock that's in the story for no reason. Yeah,
and it sets up at the beginning, and it doesn't tie in at all, really, other than it's in New Orleans. Yeah, it's very strange. I felt like if they had done it, because I was expecting them to do it this way, where, like I said, where they tie it in, where they narratively tie it into his story somehow, other than just, like, like you said, thematically, kind of.
Thematically, it works. Narratively, there's no reason for it.
Also, it feels like they forgot that they did it because we don't 200%. See it. We don't see it again until the end of the movie, and she's like, "Oh yeah, about that clock."
They also took the clock down.
Yeah, well, it was like, "Wait, what?"
Okay.
And then it gets flooded by spoilers, Katrina, because that's what happens at the end of this movie. This movie's really a mess. Like, it's kind of a mess.
It just kind of is.
It's like a sweet, saccharine, like, mess. Like, it's just like, and it felt like they didn't really know where they were going with it. It is, and I don't want to get in too much of comparisons to Forrest Gump, as I alluded to in the intro, because you've never seen Forrest Gump, and we're going to do it for the podcast eventually, because it is based on a book. And it's another one where they change a lot from the book, from what I understand. But, so it's the same screenwriter, and it hits a lot of the same elements, but I feel like the Forrest Gump must have had either had a much more focused structure that he pulled from in the book, or something that or it had a more concrete ending and more of a concrete arc and journey for that character. Yeah. Whereas this felt like they were doing the same thing, but they didn't know where they were going with it.
Well, I mean, I haven't read Forrest Gump yet, which I'm really glad that I haven't seen that movie, though, even though people always give me weird looks when I say that I haven't seen it.
It's a great film.
Because I get to read the book, like, pure.
Yeah, it's interesting because
all I know is that it's about chocolates.
It's supposedly very different.
Okay, I'm excited. Anyway, so I haven't read Forrest Gump, so I can't, like, comment to the differences, but, like, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, the short story it's a concept.
Yeah.
It's a concept about a guy who ages backwards. And there's not a whole lot more to it. Like, we see different parts of his life, but basically, what I theorize happened is that the screenwriter was given these bare bones and just went hog wild filling them out.
Yeah.
And somebody should have reined him in.
I don't even think... My biggest problem isn't that he went hog wild filling it out, because I could see this movie working in the same way that Forrest Gump works. One of the biggest problems for me, the reason that it doesn't work, is that if you've ever seen Forrest Gump, you're like, oh, I've seen this movie. Kind of. I mean, it's different, but it does a very similar thing, just with an added, like, weird sci-fi twist to it. Not sci-fi, but, whatever, like a fantasy twist to it. But it's a very similar type thing of, like, a sort of an ordinary guy who goes through a lot of somewhat extraordinary life events. And there's a lover who comes in and out of his life, and, without spoiling Forrest Gump. And so I mean, there's even a fucking plot points about him learning to walk and shit like that. Like, it's so very similar in a lot of ways. The problem this one has is that Forrest Gump had an ending. Or I don't know if it did from the book, but the movie feels like it ends. Like, it feels like it was going somewhere the whole time. It even has a very similar frame story where it's somebody telling the story of the man's life. It's the same fucking movie. It's ridiculous. But it felt like it was going somewhere. This one, I never felt like it was going somewhere. And then when we finally ended, I was like, oh, it wasn't. And now you can argue, and I understand. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Thus is life. Blah, blah, blah.
Right. Thus
Fuck
is
your
life.
French
You live and then you die.
cinema. Yeah, I get it. But at the same time, narratively in a film, it's a little like, meh. Like, it feels like it doesn't have a through line that, or a, I know. As much as I say that, at the same time, I go, yeah, that's the point, idiot. And I get it. It's just not satisfying.
Well, it's
unsatisfying in an unsatisfying way.
Yeah, it's not satisfying, and for an almost 3-hour film, it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
Like, you need that through line for a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
You need it.
Or something. Yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing. In Forrest Gump, you don't even know what the through line is, but it shows up. It's been a while since I've seen it, but from what I remember, you don't really even know why you're learning or why you're hearing this man's story.
Yeah.
Or where it's going. But by the time it gets to the ending, it all feels like it made sense. And
I think that's probably...
And again, I get it.
But that's probably another thing that made it feel unsatisfying to us, though, because the reason that we're hearing Benjamin's story is so that What's-Her-Face can find out he's her dad.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a moment for us.
No, it was a silly
fizzled.
moment. We laughed. We laughed. You're 100% right. Because it is an interesting narrative idea to have... I can see the mother... She keeps that secret from her daughter for her whole life, and at that moment deciding this is when I'll tell her, I'll explain it to her. And I even while watching the movie thought, it makes sense to tell her this way because it gives her all of the context of why you never told her about this before.
Yeah.
If you tell her Benjamin's whole life and everything that he's been through up until the moment where they had you and then he left, it puts a lot of context on it that makes it, I don't know if it's easier to swallow, but it at least for her character gives it some context other than, oh, by the way, your dad's this guy who aged backwards and he left when you were a kid because he didn't think he could grow up and raise you properly because I would have to raise him. Like, it would be nonsense. But if you do it, if you'd have her read this journal about his whole life, it kind of makes sense. Yeah. But again, the reveal of that moment, which is maybe the most pivotal thing, that reveal of when she finds out should have been much more, it should have impacted us in a way where that wasn't laughter.
Yeah. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And if they would have done that better, it could have turned the whole film around into a very heartwarming, or not even heartwarming, but a very interesting study of life's journey and context and the relationships between parents and that sort of thing. But it kind of completely failed at the single key point that it needed to achieve to make all of it work. Yeah. I think. I don't know. All right.
That's my theory.
Yeah. Okay. Got a couple more. This is good though. We're doing like all of our general discussion during this, which is fine. We're just getting it all out of the way here. This is okay. And this you alluded to earlier, but Kate Blanchett's character, is she in the book? Daisy.
No.
Is there somebody like her in the book?
Not really, no.
Really? There's not like a love interest that comes and goes?
He does have a wife at one point, but it's completely different.
Okay.
Her name is Hildegard. And
Hildegard?
It's the 20s.
Is there actually Hildegard
it's not it's not the 20s in the story. It's set like around the Civil War. So
yeah, they moved it forward.
So
that they could have the sweet ending where it's Katrina.
Right.
For no reason.
What was the point?
No reason. And that's one of those like M. Night Shyamalan, not even twists, but just like, because it's, I mean, if you like,
it was topical, I guess.
I think if you had seen it in 2008, we would have put it together really quick,
right?
But since it's so far removed, we're like, they're talking about a hurricane throughout the film. It's just a hurricane, like whatever. Okay. And then I guess we could have put it together with the fact that the whole story takes place in New Orleans, but we also just weren't really paying attention. I mean,
but there are hurricanes in New Orleans all the time.
Yeah.
It's in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right. And so it was just like, but then, there's no reason.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Again.
Other than there's a line throughout the film where people go, a storm is coming. Throughout the whole life of Benjamin Button, a storm is coming.
But much like the clock, it works thematically.
Yeah.
But has nothing to do with the story narratively.
No, not at all. Other than people get to say a storm's coming. And then it does eventually forever later. And the clock gets flooded even though it already stopped running because Benjamin was already dead. That was another thing that bothered me about if the hurricane had flooded the clock and that was like the moment Benjamin died, it doesn't. It's just he's already dead at this point. Like, what is the point? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, so Daisy's character, not in the story, not in the book. What, do you have another one?
Yeah, I have one more. So she's okay. My guess was just that she was like mentioned, but wasn't like the same through line character that she was. But apparently no. Last one is Lightning Guy, and I'm 100% positive he's not in him. Okay, I think that's actually based on a real guy.
Is it?
That I think I vaguely remember this when I was looking up the trivia about this film. Was them saying that character is based on a real person that was like struck like a bunch of times by lightning. And I liked that through line as as just like a joke relief every now and then of like, I thought that was interesting.
Did we see all 7? Were you counting?
I think we did.
Okay. I'm
pretty sure we did. And there's some irony or I don't know if irony is the right word, but in the fact that so many people in Benjamin's life come and go or die. And the one guy who's there through the whole film is the guy who's been struck by lightning 7 times. The unluckiest person in the world happens to live longer than like anybody else in the movie.
Yeah.
So, whatever. I kind of get what they were going for. And it added some humor at moments throughout the film that was desperately needed, but or some levity. But that's it for Was That in the Book? Because, like I said, I pretty much got out of the way with the first one. Anything. Answer no. Moving along. Lost in adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
This one isn't so much anything I was confused about, again, because since I knew there's not much you're going to be able to expand upon. This was more a question about the movie that we can discuss.
I'm amped.
Maybe Lost in... I don't know if I have the right word for it, but because it wasn't adapted. So the car accident is what we're going to talk about. The scene where Daisy gets hit by a car. Since that character wasn't in the book, I'm going to say that moment wasn't in the book.
No.
The car accident, or has that ever happened to a wife or a friend or anything? No, okay. So in the film, if you haven't seen it, Daisy, who is a dancer, Daisy is his love interest throughout the movie that he meets when he's a little kid. And she's a little kid. She's like 6 years younger than him, or roughly. But they meet when they're young, and they're friends throughout. And then they see each other every now and then. And then she comes and she goes to New York to be a dancer. And she comes back, and they, on and off again, sort of unrequited love thing until they finally marry. And I don't even know if they get married, but
move into an apartment together.
Move in together and have a kid. Blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. And then he leaves her. But at one point, when she's a dancer, she gets hit by a car in London, Paris.
Yeah.
And they do this whole butterfly effect sequence. Or the for Jurassic Park fans, this is the chaos theory type of thing, where it's if any one little chain in the event, and in the day's events changed at all, she wouldn't have been hit by this car.
Right.
Which, sure, cool, I'm over that narratively. My question and problem with the scene was that, so this whole movie is, and I didn't even mind it from a filmmaking perspective. I know you had problems with it, but I thought it was fun, and I say fun. I thought it was interesting and well executed and enjoyable to watch. And we all knew where it was going. It maybe went on a little too long. I won't disagree there. But my problem was from a writing perspective, I think, in that, so the rest of the film, we're hearing and they make a big point of this, is that she is Benjamin Button's daughter is reading his journal.
Yes.
And whenever it's his words written in a journal, and because we have scenes where she's reading it out loud and then it transitions to his voice reading his journal, recounting events that happened to him in his life. And that's the whole movie. But then all of a sudden in this one scene, for some reason, he's omniscient.
Yeah. He knows everything that happened, even stuff that he couldn't have possibly known.
Yeah. I was so confused. I was like, wait, so, okay. Why are you doing it in his voice? Because, I mean, what other voice could they have used? But at the same time, I was like, well, this makes no sense within line of what we know about this world. He has never been omniscient.
No.
He has never known anything about anything other than his life. He has only been telling his story. All of a sudden, he's telling about some woman going to a bakery and getting a thing, and then
the truck driver, and then the friend breaking the shoelace, and
all of these events that literally he becomes an omniscient narrator.
No, like, conceivably, I guess he could have asked Daisy about the shoelace.
Yeah,
but that doesn't excuse all the other stuff.
No, there are elements, and then I started thinking about it the whole time. There are elements that, maybe she said, "Oh, my friend broke." Like, maybe he could piece together some of it. But there are tons of things where it's like, unless he everybody involved was questioned by the police in extreme detail, and then I had to but that was distracting me the whole time. Plus, on top of that, it goes on way too long, because by the time we're just like, we know what's going on.
Well, yeah, that scene, to me, is like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a pull quote, because I don't know the movie term for it. It's like a pull quote when you pull a quote out of something that exemplifies the whole article.
Right.
So for me, that scene was like a pull quote that exemplified the other
microcosm
issues
is
with a microcosm. Yeah. Sure. So similar to how we had a problem with the big reveal of the daughter being Benjamin's daughter, because we saw it coming a mile away.
Yeah.
And similar to how this movie stretched on and on and on, this scene also stretched on and on and on. He goes through every single thing, every little minute detail that happens leading up to her getting hit by the car, and then goes through them again.
Yeah. And saying how they could be slightly different, and then she wouldn't get hit by the car.
And the whole time, I'm like, we all know where this is going.
Yeah.
We all know what's going to happen, so can you please just get to the point?
Yeah. I think it went on a little too long. I'll only disagree in the sense that I mean, that was 100% on purpose, that you know where it's going. It's the inevitability of the moment. Part of that, it comes across in the filmmaking by you knowing what's going to happen, and it being this thing where you're like, oh, we know what's going to happen. But it does get to a point where it's writing there's this thing where you have to write a fine line in filmmaking between being something that's I don't want to say bad on purpose, but unsettling or uncomfortable or distracting on purpose, because it's making you think about, or it's making you experience the emotion you're supposed to feel in that moment. Like we talked about earlier with when we talked about earlier that his story has an unsatisfying ending. Right. That's on purpose. Yeah. Because thus is life, as the French say, or whatever the fuck, c'est la vie, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you have to write a fine line between something being unsatisfying on purpose, because that's the point, and it just being unsatisfying. And this one tilted up, because that was a lot of people, and I don't want to get into a whole sidetrack about The Last Jedi, but that was a big problem a lot of people had with a lot of the stuff that happened in The Last Jedi, was that a lot of the reveals and the answers that they got were unsatisfying. Mm-hmm. And now, to me, that was obviously the point about a lot of them. And for me, it worked, and I didn't find them unsatisfying in a way that was unsatisfying. Uh-huh. In this one, I found some of the things, like the sort of fizzling at the end, unsatisfyingly. And the same thing with this moment. Well,
to me, this moment, it's supposed to be building that kind of suspense, and I'll cede to your point that we are supposed to know where it's going.
It's the inevitability of.
But I think it rode past suspense into annoying.
Yeah. I agree. And that's what I'm saying. There's a fine line. There is a fine line they're trying to write, and they failed, I think, on a couple points here where they just went too far one direction, and it just made the movie not click or work in the way that they hoped it would. I mean, according to us, it fucking got nominated for Best Picture, but who knows what else was nominated that year. I mean, it lost to No Country for Old Men, which is a vastly superior film. So, the only other thing I have at this moment is that is he making it up?
Maybe.
For his journal? You know what I mean?
Maybe it's like a creative license kind of thing.
That's the only other thought I had about it to kind of square it narratively. I think
that's the only rational explanation.
Is that he sort of created this like fantastical, I don't want to say fantastical, but this weird narrative around this moment.
Yeah.
Because it ultimately is the thing that kind of brings them together.
Yeah.
Kind of. Because she stops dancing and comes back to America and that sort of thing. So he maybe crafted this whole narrative on it that he wrote down, but it's not actually what happened really. Or maybe it is, but it's, that's the only, I'm just trying to, throw out an alternative hypothesis for this scene that makes no sense in the film. But.
And I think the idea that he just made it up makes the most sense.
Yeah. But it has to be, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense.
Right. But
at least that makes some sense.
Why?
All right. Done with that. Let's move along to better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
Okay, so if you if you listened to our prequel episode for this episode, I had an interesting little tidbit that apparently F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of this story, called it the funniest story ever written.
Yeah.
His own story.
Yeah.
Funniest story ever written.
Yeah.
I think he oversold it.
I don't know, haven't read the short story, but based on the movie we watched, boy, did he ever.
I didn't, I can see, because the story itself is kind of satirical in a way.
That's kind of
and I can see that, and I can see also how an audience in a previous time period would have found it more humorous.
Yes, I agree with all of this, yes.
But I didn't think it was that funny.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Which is funny because they don't, the movie doesn't think it's funny at all. The movie plays it, and I think the movie
takes it very seriously.
And I think that's rightfully so, because I think it is an interesting play on the idea of aging and mortality, and how, playing with the idea that, because kind of when we get to the end of the movie, that his, childlike him is very similar to what we would consider like a senile old person.
Right.
And they're very similar. And so I get, you know what I mean? I get what they're doing, and I think it actually works in that regard. Mm-hmm. I think they needed a stronger overall narrative to tie that, or to use this conceit within. Mm-hmm. But I get what they were doing, and I think it's an interesting thing to do, and I think they did it okay.
Yeah.
And I think doing it serious is the right way to do it, because I don't think it would play funny. Like
no.
I don't think it would play funny, at least with modern audiences. I don't think so.
Okay, so there's just a couple things that I want to talk about. One is kind of a big, thematic change that they made from book to movie, which is that in the movie, he... How am I even going to explain this? When he appears old.
When he's young.
Yeah, when he's young, but he appears to be old. He wants to be in a younger body. He acts young, even though he looks old.
Right.
And people insist on treating him like he's an old man.
Right.
But in the book, he's born an old man,
Oh, like mentally?
And he acts like he's not like senile, but like he acts like an old man. Like he prefers to like sit around and do old man things.
Oh, interesting.
But people insist on trying to treat him like he's young. Like his parents like give him toys and they're like, you have to play with these toys because you're only 3, even though he's like 70.
Huh.
So I don't know that it's really an issue of like that it was better either way, because it's just so different.
Yeah, it's just wildly different.
But I think it's making like kind of different commentary.
It is, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so
I will say this, that with the story they had wanted to tell with the movie, and this because this is a problem, not to say a problem, but one of the things we discussed is that they had to make in the film they had to make him a child in an old man's body,
right? Because
he's like, I don't want to say, and flirting's not the right word, but he's infatuated with a.
That's the other thing that I wanted to talk about.
Okay, well, he's infatuated with a 10-year-old Daisy or whatever.
Right, yeah.
And it's already kind of weird and off-putting in the film, but if he were acting like an old man, also within that, because it's similar. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but it's similar to the idea of Shape of Water to an extent where you have to look past what you're seeing.
Right.
He is a child like this in the film. His mind is that of an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, whatever, however old he is. He's 6 years older than her, so that doesn't make any sense. They say he is 6 years older than her, but that moment when they're playing in like under the table in the film, she's like 10. He would have to be 16, and there's no way he's 16 in that moment. No. Come on, you movie. But anyways, regardless, whatever. Let's say they're both 10 in that scene. That scene, 100%. It was already, but so it makes us go, okay, he's got to look past the fact that he looks like a creepy old man. Mm-hmm. He is a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old, and him playing and flirting in the way 8-year-olds do or whatever isn't weird, even though it seems like it is. Yeah, you know what I mean. And so they kind of had to do it that way for the film, because if he was an old man, then it is. Yeah.
No, I mean, that was the other thing that I did want to touch on.
Okay, sorry.
I think the thing with him and Daisy is interesting. It is a little creepy.
It is.
In those first moments.
I don't disagree. I think it's on purpose, but
yeah, it is, and it is definitely more engaging than what happens in the book. Because what happens in the book is when he is like, I guess he is like 50. Okay, so like however many years he's been alive is like, I don't know.
Wait,
20
so you're saying
or something?
Oh, so he's 20. He's looks 50.
20. He looks 50. But he also acts 50.
Right. I forgot about that
book. Yeah. Right. He marries a much younger woman. Oh, I guess they're the same age, but he's acting like he's 50. So he marries this woman who's like in her 20s. And it's great for a while. And then she's getting older and he's getting younger, and basically like gets bored with her. And like shuffles her off somewhere to live by herself, and he goes out and has a fun time.
Yeah.
And like I said, movie is more engaging. It's more interesting to watch. But I thought the kind of the commentary of the story was a little more interesting and biting.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. It's funny because I think they also... It's interesting because I feel like they try to play it both ways a bit in the movie. Mm-hmm. And that part of the reason he leaves after they have their child is that they make the big point of, you shouldn't have to raise both of us or whatever.
Yeah.
And they do sort of play it like he is sort of having like those young...
Right.
Almost not rebellious, but like... exploratory years in his 50s or 60s or 70s, or however old he's supposed to be when he's, looks like he's 30 or whatever. But very clearly early in the film, he's playing like he is whatever age he is physically and not whatever age he resembles is the age he acts. Like when he's a little tiny old man on the porch in a wheelchair, he's looking at little kids playing in the yard, wishing he could go play with them. But feels like there's a moment later where it kind of switches almost.
Yeah, and actually that kind of happens in the story too. Okay. Because he acts the age that he looks until he starts to like get more into like his teens, and he starts to like really go backwards. And it's meant to mirror the way that when you get old, people stop taking you seriously. Okay. The same way that they don't take younger people seriously. Yeah. Like it's meant to like draw a parallel.
Yeah, and they do the same thing kind of inverse in the film. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah.
I don't know. It's got to be a really confusing thing to write about. Yeah. And I don't.
That's why he only wrote 20 pages.
I know, right?
Couldn't go super in depth with it because it gets a little confusing. All right. Is that it for Better in the Book?
Yeah.
All right, let's move along to Better in the Movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
So they killed off his mom in the movie.
Yeah, when she dies giving birth. She dies,
childbirth. That decision makes sense because in the story, his mom literally vanishes from the narrative after giving birth. She's just never mentioned again.
And does the dad do the same thing?
No, he doesn't abandon him. He begrudgingly raises him. His dad, hates him until they're the same age. And then they get along. And then I guess his dad dies. I don't know. He kind of vanishes too at some point.
Yeah.
So I thought that made sense, I guess, to do that, especially if you're going to kind of get rid of the dad too.
Yeah.
I liked that they had him living in an old folks home.
Yeah, that was a fun.
I thought that was not in the
hilarious.
Book at all.
No, that's a really that's a clever idea.
Yeah.
I think it worked really well. So none of that, Mrs. I can't remember his name. The woman who raises them in the film.
Yeah.
She's not in the book at all.
No, Queenie.
Yeah, Queenie.
No, she's not in the book at all. But actually, that brings me to my next point. So in the story, there is some racist stuff.
In the book?
Yes, in the book. So I said earlier that it's set
Civil War-ish.
Right. It starts right before the Civil War, and then I think the war happens while he's a kid/old man.
Right.
And then the rest of it is obviously post Civil War. But there's this moment right at the beginning of the story where the father is bringing him home from the hospital, and they walk past the slave auction blocks, and there's a line where the dad is like, for a moment he wished his son was black. And I was like, oh no. Oh no, Fitzgerald.
Well, isn't Fitzgerald notoriously a racist asshole?
I don't know. I've only read The Great Gatsby. I mean, probably.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's not.
Nope, I was thinking of
bit out of the realm of possibility.
Correction, I was thinking of Francis Scott Key, the dude who wrote our national anthem.
Oh yeah, he was super racist.
Yes, sorry, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Francis Scott Key.
F. Scott Fitzgerald, I don't know, but probably.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Everybody back then was a little racist.
I
mean, we're all probably still a little
He does
racist.
Call it a horrible moment, but I'm like, what? Why? This doesn't add anything to the story. I mean, I guess it makes his dad more of a douche, but...
Yeah.
So anyway, so what was interesting to me was that I almost felt like the movie was trying to like mitigate the racism that's present in the short story.
Yeah.
And I think it is debatable because all of the characters of color are poor, working class, caretakers, etc. But they're definitely positive characters.
They're positive characters, and you have to. To me, it's treading a fine line with the time period.
Yeah,
I think it's tough. I don't want to say you can't have non-poor, uneducated people of color in that era of stories. There were some,
right? Because non-poor educated people of color did exist in our history.
Sure,
it just wasn't the norm.
It was It was pretty rare. I don't know how rare it was, but it was relatively rare, and it was definitely much more common, and it would be much more likely, and especially in the narrative that they're using, where they're running she's like the caretaker of an old folks home, and her boyfriend / husband is
and in the
like
deep
the cook
South too,
and they're in the South. Yeah, they're in the deep South. It makes sense for them. I think it's again, it's not my place necessarily to say, but I think it's a fairly reasonably positive portrayal given the circumstances, if that's the right way to say it. Given we're in Louisiana in the 1920s.
Yeah.
They're smart, they're educated. Even within the sort of lesser roles in society that they have as like a cook at an old folks home or whatever as Tizzy does, or
caretaker,
and then she's like the caretaker, Queenie. They kind of go out of their way to make it clear that there's a lot more to these people than just being the caretaker or being the cook. They're much more nuanced and interesting people, and smarter people than you would maybe attribute to something of that, like somebody doing that job potentially. So it's complicated.
I do think that they're positive characters. I'm just saying it is something we could debate, as we just did.
As we did. Yeah.
But I did think it was interesting because it seemed to me almost like a conscious effort to mitigate the racism that's present in the book.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
On a side note to that, this is the first David Fincher film I've seen, maybe 7. It's been a while. That didn't give me weird misogynist vibes. I'd have to think about it, but I don't think I really ever felt. The only thing that felt a little weird, and it wasn't misogynist so much as it was apologetic for dudes. I don't know if that's the right word. It felt like Benjamin's dad got off the hook a little easy in terms of
of what he did. Yeah. No, I agree.
And sort of like, now Benjamin doesn't just like forgive him and is fine with it. There's a falling out and that sort of thing. But it felt a little like we were supposed to be a little too sympathetic for his character.
Yeah.
Given that he left his baby on a step and has no idea if it was even alive.
Well, and you know what I think would have helped with that? When Queenie's character finds out about his father and she immediately gets angry.
Yeah.
I think had she been given her platform in that moment to say her piece, I think that would have helped with that issue.
Yeah.
Because she starts to say it and she kind of gets, in that moment, she gets portrayed as like angry, crazy woman.
Yeah. And then she kind of not immediately, but
she gets shushed after a minute. Like, I don't remember exactly what happens.
Is she like sleeping or something?
But there's, he like leaves the room or tells her to go to bed or something.
Yeah, but he's mad. But I feel like she tells him to forgive him or something. I could be wrong.
I don't remember.
I say it's
but
been a while.
She gets mad though.
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
And I think that it would have helped to mitigate that had she been given a proper platform and been allowed to say her piece.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that would have helped. And again, it wasn't a huge thing because, like I said, he's definitely very clearly like he doesn't just like immediately forgive him or like
right.
And there is something to be said about that journey and him sort of realizing his and coming to terms with his guilt. It felt like we didn't really ever really see him have to deal with it that much.
I know, I agree. Yeah.
And so it just felt a little like, he felt like a little too sympathetic, or like we were supposed to like him more than we should, given
the fact that he left his
child for dead.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That was the only thing in the whole movie, and I'm sure there's something else, but that was the thing that hit me. I was like, that feels a little weird. But anyways, okay. All right, well, that's it for Better in the Movie. We're about to get to the final verdict, but before we do, we have a couple loose ends to tie up, so let's do that right now.
Okay, so the book that I checked out from the library to read this story in is like it's got like extra stuff in it. It's not a textbook, but it almost is.
Yeah.
So one of the things that was included with the story was a short anonymous letter that someone wrote to F. Scott Fitzgerald after reading this story in the literary magazine that it originally appeared in. And this letter is funnier than the entire story.
All right, then.
So, here we go. Sir, I have read the story Benjamin Button in Collier's, and I wish to say that as a short story writer, you would make a good lunatic. I have seen many pieces of cheese in my life, but of all the pieces of cheese I have ever seen, you are the biggest piece. I hate to waste a piece of stationery on you, but I will.
Well then.
Who is that guy? I want to know that guy.
Probably Mark Twain. It's probably Mark fucking Twain. They were alive at the same time, right? No. Was he after?
I don't know.
I think Gatsby, or not Gatsby. I think he was after. Fitzgerald was after. Wasn't he? Wasn't Fitzgerald like the late 1800s, early 1900s, and Twain was the early 1800s?
He was jazz era.
Yeah, like the early 1900s.
Okay, Mark Twain lived until 1910.
Yeah, I feel like.
And F. Scott Fitzgerald was born in 1896.
So he probably didn't write this.
Probably not, yeah.
After Twain was dead. Yeah, okay. Oh, well. Still sounds like something Twain would write.
I'm just going to believe that it was Mark Twain.
From beyond the grave.
I feel like if anyone could resurrect themselves to write a sassy fucking letter
stand-up of F. Scott Fitzgerald, it's Mark Twain. True facts. Oh, true facts. All right. The only other thing I had before we get on to the final verdict is... one, this movie definitely deserved the Oscars it won for Best Makeup and Best Visual Effects. This was 2008, and the effects work they do to make Brad Pitt's head appear on a tiny little old man body and with old man makeup is astounding. It blew my mind for like the first 45 minutes or however long he is that little small old man. Because and what the thing that I could constantly was comparing it to in my head was Captain America, the First Avenger, or whatever the first one was called, where they put Chris Evans' head on
the tiny little shrinky body.
Dude. Yeah, it reminded me of that, but it honestly looked better than that. And at the same time, they were making him look like an old man and not just like Chris Evans' head on a little body. I was like wildly impressed by how they pulled that off and all the different things they must have done in terms of like probably, and I think I mentioned this in the prequel episode, probably a lot of stuff like they did in Lord of the Rings, where it was sometimes body doubles with a CG head, sometimes Brad Pitt on his knees, sometimes forced perspective, all kinds of stuff. But the fact that it was so like hard to tell and figure out what they were doing, I totally
very, very creative, very skillful.
Yeah. It was really impressive, and that was the most interesting thing probably about the film. Yeah. So
the little man baby was a little rough, I thought.
All I could think of every time I saw it was my Harry Potter trivia is leaving me. Mandrake. All I could think of was a
Like a
mandrake.
mandrake. All I could think of was the creepy CG baby from Twilight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all I could think of was those little mandrakes when they pull them out of the pots
God.
in the Harry Potter movies. But, yeah. Anything else before we get to final verdict? You had something.
I couldn't understand the characters.
Yes.
His southern accents were rough.
One of my biggest pet peeves in movies. It is one of my biggest pet peeves in movies is when I can't, part of it might just be me, but there are a lot of times in movies where people have certain accents or are an old person dying or any moment, whenever it is, if I can't understand what they're saying, it drives me insane. Because it feels like you're missing really important.
Yeah.
Especially because early in the movie, Cate Blanchett on the deathbed, I assume it's a different actress. I mean, maybe it is Cate Blanchett and tons of makeup, but to me, it looks like an older woman,
to me like a different actress.
And when she's doing that wheezing talking, I'm like, I feel like this is all super important, and I can't understand anything you're saying.
No, we'll never know. We would need she needed subtitles.
Yes, she really did. And that's the thing. I was like, and I actually almost turned them on 2 or 3 times. I just need subtitles. And then the other one was the Irish guy. I think he was Irish, right?
Yeah.
He's actually from New Zealand, that actor. He's in, I think he is. Or no, that's a different guy. I was thinking of, the guy from Flight of the Conchords, who's similar, redhead with a silly over the top. But he plays the guy who plays the Irish sailor, the tugboat captain in this film, Mark something, Captain Mark. Impossible to understand 90% of the time, and it's and especially because you even didn't realize, it's funny, a big thematic moment of the film where after the tugboat gets sunk in World War II and everybody on the ship dies other than Benjamin and one of the twins. Yeah. A hummingbird flies up by the boat that Benjamin's on and looks at him and then flies away.
What the fuck?
And you're like, what is that? Why was that? Does that mean something? And I was like, and I happened to catch the part or understand earlier when the captain was talking about how hummingbirds are super impressive and how fast they beat their wings, and he has one tattooed on his chest, and it was this thing. But yeah, I mean, you couldn't really understand him. I just was able to gather enough of the words to figure out what he was saying. But anyways, all right. It's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
So this is a really hard one because I didn't particularly enjoy either thing.
I had a feeling this was going to be the case.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it to the movie.
Okay.
And here's why.
Okay.
So the short story is it was one of those stories that I would categorize as everyone is a twat because all of the characters were awful.
Okay.
None of them had any redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
But in the movie, people had redeeming qualities.
Yeah, pretty much all of them had some redeeming qualities.
There were people I could kind of root for when I actually cared about what they were doing, which was not a lot. But so I'm going to give it to the movie for having characters with redeeming qualities.
There you go. Chalk one up for the film, which is surprising because I don't think either of us particularly liked this movie. But suck it, F. Scott Fitzgerald.
You racist old asshat.
Racist old asshole. I guess one day we'll have to do the Gatsby. There's several Gatsby films.
No, we're going to have to do the Gatsby.
I've never seen the Leonardo DiCaprio
I haven't either.
I think I did see the one from the 60s or whatever. There was one
There's a Robert Redford one.
I think I watched that one in high school.
Yeah,
maybe.
probably. I would kind of rather do the new one.
Me too, because I heard it's really different. So it'd be wild. All right. And I've actually read, I don't remember anything about it, but I have read Gatsby in high school or middle school or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, none of that is the point. Chalk it up. Film wins. Before we go, Katie, what's next on the old docket?
Hang on. What is next?
Well, while you're looking that up, I'm going to do this. I'm going to plug some stuff. First, check us out on Facebook. Just search This Film Is Lit on Facebook. Subscribe there, where we post pictures, sometimes videos, articles, that sort of thing related to the books/movies we are talking about. Check us out on Twitter, where we do the same thing, at This Film Is Lit. We also have a subreddit, reddit.com/r/thisfilmislit, where we have posts pertaining to all of our episodes, where if you want to discuss, that's probably the best place. If you want to argue or discuss or talk about any of the books or films we've reviewed, or disagree with us, you agree with us, anything like that, let us know on there, on the relevant post. We also have a Goodreads page. This Film Is Lit on Goodreads, where we keep a running tally of whether the book or the film wins. I don't know what the score is right now, but you can go on Goodreads and find out.
It's like 4-10 or something like that.
Books, or film to book. For film
to book. Yeah.
That's what I figured. Well, now it's 5-10. So, and finally, before we get to the next step, or what the next episode's going to be, do us a favor: go to iTunes, Stitcher, currently Google Play as well. Give us a rating, give us a review, 5 stars if you please. If not, that's fine. Just don't rate us. But no, you can. But yes, it's a really big help whenever you write reviews or give us ratings on any of those platforms. Helps bump us up eventually. If we have around 200 listeners ish per episode, roughly, more give or take. We get about 200 downloads within a couple days when we drop a new main episode. If 10% of those people, 1 in 10 of them, went out and gave us a rating and a review on iTunes, we'd probably end up in new and noteworthy or trending or whatever it's called. And then all of a sudden, we'd have a bunch more people listening. So
yeah, that would be really cool.
Be one of those 10 people, if you haven't already. There's a handful of you that have, but we have way more listeners than have reviewed us or rated us. So go do that. Go be your best self. All right, Katie, what are we doing next?
All right, up next, we are doing something that we have not done yet, which is review a movie currently in theaters. Well, it's not currently in theaters yet, but it will be.
Will it be?
By the time we do, it's not what you're thinking.
Okay.
By the time we do the next main episode.
Yeah. Sorry.
We're doing A Wrinkle in Time.
Yes. Wrinkle in Time.
Which is a book that I read as a kid, and I don't know how you missed it, because it's sci-fi.
I legit had never heard of it.
I don't know how
until I found out they were making a movie. I was like, what is this? I don't know either, but I had never heard of it. But that's the next episode, A Wrinkle in Time. It's going to be real time. Listen to our episode and then go see it in theaters. See how it compares to the book. But until that time, keep reading books, keep watching movies, keep being your best self, just like our adorable cat.
Albus is always his best self. A worst self doesn't exist for
That's
Albus.
True. That is very true.
He's always amazing.
We'll see you on the next episode, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else. Bye-bye.